Fortnite feels like one of the hardest games in the world, and at the same time one of the most accessible esports, because it's one of the few games where literally anyone can compete, even if you're nobody with no team. But that's exactly why the competition here is absolutely insane. And in this video I'll show you why Fortnite esports is completely different from other games, the 3 main reasons why Fortnite feels so difficult, and why even pro players struggle to stay consistent here. Let's get into it. Let's start with the main thing, what makes Fortnite so unique and why it's so hard. Fortnite is without a doubt one of the most unique games where the esports scene doesn't really feel like anything else. And at first glance it looks simple, Battle Royale, 100 players, loot, zone. But when you compare it to other games, it's not that simple anymore. In games like Counter-Strike 2 or Valorant, it's 5v5, fewer variables, and way more control over the situation. If you play consistently well, it's easier to hold that level. The main focus there is team play, holding position, and having good aim. Yeah, there's still difficulty, especially team consistently. Building a stable team is not easy either. In other battle royales like Warzone, PUBG or Apex, it mostly comes down to aim and movement, and team play too, but overall there are fewer chaotic variables and the game is more controlled, although that can be debated. In Fortnite it's similar, but then you add building on top of everything. And that's what completely changes the game. You're pressing dozens of buttons in seconds just to place builds, edit, turn your camera, and at the same time you need to understand exactly what you're doing and why. So naturally, to play at that speed against other players you need insane reaction time. And the younger age you are, the easier it is to adapt. And of course, without a lot of practice you're not getting anywhere. If you take a new player and show them FNCS endgame, they won't understand what's going on. You just see 30 players in a tiny zone, everyone building, someone dropping down, someone taking high, shots going everywhere, and all of this happened in just a few seconds. In CS or Valorant there's still complexity, but visually it's much easier to understand. And I'm not saying CS, Valorant or other competitive games are easy. They also have an insane competition, pressure and a very high skill level. But Fortnite feels different. To actually compete at a high level in tournaments or ranked, in my opinion, Fortnite takes way more time to learn from zero than most other games, because these types of mechanics doesn't exist anywhere else. That's why if someone has never played Fortnite before, they can come with decent aim and basic movement from other games, but building has to be learned from zero. It takes a couple of months just to get comfortable with basic like 90s, triple edits, shade jumps, tunneling, and that's just the foundation. Only after that you start to actually understand the game. That's only building. We're not even talking about game sense yet. Early, mid, late game, where to rotate, where to loot, who to push and who to avoid, how to get surge and how to play its roles like IGL and Fragger. I already talked about in detail in my video. Long story short, in competitive Fortnite without building, you're basically nothing, even with a good aim and game sense, unless it's zero build. And that's exactly why Fortnite is one of the hardest games, especially for new players. The second reason why Fortnite feels so difficult is the speed and constant changes. In Fortnite the situation can completely change in literally 5 seconds. You were in a safe position and a moment later everything turned into chaos and you don't even understand what happened. Yeah, that can happen in other games too, but much less often, much slower and usually not at this pace. There are just too many variables. 100 players, rotations, zone, loot, positions, and all of that is combined with building. On top of that, Fortnite is constantly changing. The meta, the map, the loot pool, the mechanics. And because of that, it's not always the player with the best aim or mechanics who wins, but often the player who adapts to the new meta the fastest. If you understand the meta before everyone else, you already have a huge advantage. And if not, well, unlucky. Because one season can play completely differently from another. For example, movement alone. One season had crush pads and fees, another had dash movement, a super squish, then jetpacks, then shockwaves and fizz grenades, and now it's shockwaves and same sliders. And while I was editing this video, Epic released another update. Now there's Shock Rock 2. and every single one of those metas plays completely differently. And a lot of time you die simply because everything happened instantly, before you could even react. You can play an entire match perfectly for 20 minutes, be fully stacked, survive the whole early and mid game, and still have 0 points because of the higher many players. And then someone just pushes you, one mistake or one bad position, and your entire game is over. Because of that, it's almost impossible for a casual player to jump in and instantly play tournaments consistently. And if you only play Fortnite once a week, you can already feel how much the game changes in just 1-2 weeks. One location gets removed, a gun gets nerfed, a new weapon or movement items gets added, and suddenly you don't even understand how to play the new meta anymore. Then you quit tournament without learning the new items, and you're already behind. In other aspect shooters, let's be honest, the game changes too, but nowhere near as much as Fortnite, and that creates a very important difference. Fortnite pro players usually adapt to other games much easier. For example, Benji Fishy. He transitioned to Valorant and reached a high level pretty quickly because he already knew how to adapt fast and perform under pressure, but the opposite usually works much worse. Players from Counter-Strike 2 or Valorant rarely switch to Fortnite and instantly perform at a high level, because Fortnite isn't just a shooter, in the constant changes, speed and chaos, and if you can't adapt fast enough, you simply fall behind. And the third reason is an insane competition. If you look at the most other games, you usually can't even compete in tournaments until you're 16, sometimes even 18, but in Fortnite and a few other games, the minimum age is 13, which naturally makes the player base much bigger. And to play most Cash Cup tournaments, you don't actually need that much. Sure, there's some requirements. 14 tournaments played in 180 days, a certain ranks and honestly isn't that hard to reach, and a few other requirements like anti-cheat and security settings. None of those are particularly difficult to complete if you're actually interested in competitive Fortnite, but compared to most esports, I'd still say the barrier to entry is much lower. Once you meet those requirements, you can simply queue up and compete. That makes competitive Fortnite accessible to almost everyone. You can literally get through the first round, qualify for the next stage, and already start earning money there. But the fact that thousands of players are competing at the same time makes the level of competition insanely high. With FNCS Fortnite biggest tournaments, it gets even harder. To qualify for tournaments with major prize pools, you first have to make it through divisions and qualify into Division 1. And if you're good enough and want to make it to lands, you have to survive long qualification runs. But here's the crazy part. Even if you're completely unknown, have no organization, and you're only 13 years old, if you qualify for a LAN, you can still go compete there. And that's the key thing about Fortnite. The opportunity is open to everyone, but that's exactly what makes the competition even more brutal. And a lot of talented players start extremely young, especially in Europe. You can find 14-15 years old already dominating experienced pro players. Just look at the FNCS Major 1 Summit. It happened only about a month ago, and there were players as young as 14, 15 and 16 years old competing on one of the biggest Fortnite stages in the world. One example is Shark, who is just 14 years old on his very first LAN event, placed third at an FNCS Major 1 Summit alongside his teammate Tini, and I already talked about Shark in one of my previous videos. And the longer Fortnite exists, the harder the game becomes. New mechanics get added, new strategies appear, players become faster and smarter, and every year people improve even faster than before. The level required to stay among the very best players today is much higher than it used to be, and you can actually see that in practice. Back in 2025, Stable Ronaldo, a player who won an FNCS title back in late 2019 and earned about $100,000 from Fortnite, challenged Peterbot to a series of 1v1s. Peterbot won 100 times in a row. Stable Ronaldo didn't win a single game.
Alright, bro.
GG, Johnny.
And that's not at all because Ronaldo was a bad player. It's because the skill gap in Fortnite has risen so much over the years that even former top players can struggle against the very best players today. And because of how competitive Fortnite has become, even some of the best players in the world fail to qualify for launch sometimes. Just look at the FNTS global champions, Queasy, Sweezy and Mertage. They won the biggest tournament of 2025, yet only Sweezy qualified for the FNTS Major 1 Summit LAN. That's just how brutal Fortnite competition can be. And honestly, that's completely normal in Fortnite. And all of this together creates a game where everything is decided in seconds, and one mistake can completely destroy your tournament. You can play incredibly well, then die because of a random third party, you win a fight, you're low HP, another play instantly shows up and finishes you. Or maybe you die to the zone, height, storm surge, or one of the countless situations Fortnite can throw you at a split second. And because of that, you can miss qualification entirely. That's why even top pro players have huge ups and downs. Being consistent in Fortnite is genuinely difficult. But honestly, that's also why so many people love the game. Because of how unique, chaotic and difficult the game is. And that's exactly why it's so hard to stay consistent in Fortnite. Building, constant changes, and insanely high competition. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to subscribe and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.